Hello and welcome. My name is Roni Firon, and this is The Bigger Picture, where we sit down with experts to hear about their journeys, their insights, and the big ideas that drive them. Stay tuned for today's episode. So today I got the chance to sit down with two really incredible individuals, Nir Minerbi and Amir Naveh, who are two of the founders of a quantum computing company called Classiq, and that's Classiq with a Q. Quantum computing is an exciting new approach that integrates computers as we know them today with the principles of quantum physics. This is a new, revolutionary frontier that's still growing, and really when we sat down to talk about the exciting work that's happening in this field, it sounded almost like science fiction. Nir and Amir did an amazing job in simplifying things for us and giving us a background on the evolution of quantum physics itself. We spoke about the emerging industry of quantum computing and about what part they hope their company Classiq will play in this new frontier. We also got into their journey being founders of a startup and spoke at length about their philosophies around work-life balance, personal growth, and how to cultivate a company culture of family and excellence. I hope you enjoy. So today we're going to talk about your company, Classiq, which is in the field of quantum computing, which might sound very science fiction to most people. And I'm really looking forward to talking with you guys and exploring this field. So to start, first, can you kind of give the audience a bit of an introduction on who you guys are and how you got to this field of quantum computing?
Right. So my name is Amir, 30 years old. Well, I was into physics already in high school, but main background is studies and then a long service in the Israeli Ministry of Defense. So a lot of algorithms, software development, mainly in the satellite industry. And then pretty new to quantum and quantum computing, but my passion is really for developing new technologies, new algorithms, new software projects. So that's sort of how I got into this field.
Amazing. And Neil?
So I'm almost 30, not yet. For the last decade, I was also mainly in the Israeli intelligence community, started in a Talpiot program. After that, cybersecurity units. And we established this company together and with our third co-founder, Dr. Nir Minerbi, a year and a half ago. And, it's exciting. My background is in physics. My experience in software and quantum computing is the combination. So it's quite exciting.
Beautiful. So we are talking about this term, quantum computing, and I'm sure that some of the listeners aren't exactly sure because it's such a new field. So before we jump into quantum computing, can you guys give us a bit of an overview about quantum physics and how it relates to quantum computing?
Sure. So I'll start. So the story about quantum is pretty much like every science story we have, So what is science is understanding nature and maybe a few decades after harnessing it to our own needs. So let's start like 300 years ago with Isaac Newton and also Maxwell, which discovered, electricity and mechanics. And it was like some kind of interesting point in physics because most of the scientists believe we know everything, right? There is nothing else to be discovered because we know how a tennis ball would fall from our hand, and we also know how galaxies move, and how electricity and waves act.
Yeah, I think that's every generation thinks that it's figured everything out, right?
Yes, and then COVID comes, right?
Exactly. So. Another curveball in the mix.
Yeah. So it was, it was a nice time to summarize physics, and because it was all solved. And then, like at the beginning of the 20th century, things were more interesting because Niels Bohr and Albert Einstein and some more genius physicists discovered that nature is not so simple. It wasn't so simple before, but they discovered some phenomena that they couldn't explain. And I'll give an example. So usually when we are talking about, physical stuff like this table or a tennis ball or anything else, we know perfectly well where are they located, right? If I'll go to the bathroom and come back, this table will remain here. No chance that it will, reappear in Australia. But they discovered that in some experiments they did, it was more interesting. So what he did is shooting electrons. Electron is like a tennis ball, only very, 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 very small, right? So it has its own mass. So it should be in one place at a time. But what they discovered is that electrons are in very different places at the same time. And finding the electron in specific place is probabilistic. It's not deterministic. And that was not only weird, that was a revolution. And Einstein hated it. He just couldn't understand how nature could be probabilistic. And that was one very weird phenomena. The other one, which is very interesting, is quantum entanglement. So usually we are used to the speed of light to be, some upper bound to the, to how fast we can move information from one place to the other. So if you are located on Earth and someone is located on the sun, so first, good luck to him. But you can't transfer information in a second. It will take like 8 minutes, if I recall. And what's interesting about quantum entanglement is you can take two quantum particles. It could be two photons or electrons or many more. Do some operations on both of them, then send one of them to the other side of the universe, really, really far away, and they still connected, right? So if you change one of them, at the very same moment, you know that the second one will be changed, or at least let's say that you have, they have two possible colors, right? Blue and white. So once you check the one on Earth and it's blue, so you know for 100% that the other one is blue, even though a moment before it was probabilistic. You couldn't have said that. And that was another evolution. It doesn't mean that you can transform information faster than light, but that's kind of deep physics. I don't want to get there, but that was very counterintuitive. And this is another very significant part of quantum physics. So just to summarize, at the beginning of the 20th century, we understood, not we, Einstein and his friend understood that physics is much more complex than what was assumed before. Nature is complex, nature is quantum. And in the next few decades, quantum mechanics was developed, and it was solved by the Schrodinger's equation, which
Right.
which tells us exactly how a quantum state will evolve in time.
Okay, we mentioned Schrodinger. Can you tell us about the Schrodinger's cat, just for people who don't know what that means?
Yeah, sure. So the Schrodinger's cat was an experiment, a virtual experiment, not
a thought experiment.
Yeah, thought experiment, exactly, which tried to demonstrate the element of superposition, meaning, a particle can be in several places or states at the same time. So they took a box and, a cat, and they put a cat inside the box, and then they shoot a photon, which was in superposition. He was able to let's say, enter or not enter the box with the same probability, 50% and 50%. If it gets inside the box, it will initiate some poison gas in the box, and the cat will die, obviously. And if not, so he will still be a cat in the box, but alive, right? So this experiment, what Schrödinger says is, until you measure, you open the box and you see whether the cat is alive or dead, so the cat is also in a superposition. It's at the same time live and dead. And this brings us to the another very important element of quantum physics, which is measurement. Because all of this magic of superposition breaks when you measure when you check where it is. So let's return to this table, right? It's very solid, right? But according to quantum mechanics, if I'm taking a look to the other direction, it has some real probability of disappearing. And obviously the probability is very, very, very low because it's a macroscopic object. It's not quantum in its nature like electron and photon. It's highly entangled, and that's another phrase from this space, which means the quantum characteristics are hard to observe, but it has some probability to disappear. And every time I'm taking a look at it, so I'm measuring it, so I'm making sure it's here. So I'll keep watching.
So the table doesn't disappear.
Oh, yeah.
Brilliant, brilliant. There's this idea of observing that I think it's so cool when you almost, it's how our consciousness kind of interacts with physics and the world. Very, very cool to think about, in my opinion. Okay, so we've arrived at this idea of quantum physics, which basically, to put very simply, tells us that the world isn't as clear-cut as we thought it was beforehand, right? We were, before the quantum physics, as you said, there was a very mechanistic, machine-like, orderly view of the universe, and all of a sudden there's all of this probability and this chaos, and you're not quite sure where you are, and I think just a lot of, I guess, the probability aspect of it is the most significant that comes into the mix. So, okay, we talked about quantum physics. Now, what is this thing called quantum computing? Because, we all know computers and, known as classical computing, and now we have quantum computing. So if we're talking about photons and electrons that might be here, might be there, how does that relate to computing?
Right. So I'll start describing the concept, and then Amir will dive into the technical details. So the Schrödinger's equation was developed like in the end of the 20s of the previous century. And after that, we had some 5 decades of many Nobel Prizes in quantum physics. But and also some practicality, by the way. Classical computers work with transistors, and the operation that enables the transistor to work is quantum as well. So that was maybe the first quantum revolution, but only in the 80s. So Richard Feynman, one of the greatest physicists and Nobel Prize winner as well, he said something like that. Classical computers are great. We can do so many things with them, but nature is quantum, right? And if we want to solve some of the most challenging problems in nature, classical computers are limited. So we should better do it on a quantum computer which, is based on quantum mechanics, and it is much more natural for it to perform these computations. And now I think it's a good time for Amir to explain what is quantum computing.
Okay, so one of the things that I want us to talk about is this idea of, the binary code of classical computing, this very yes, no, 1, 0, and how quantum computing kind of turns that on its head.
Right. Yeah. So let's start with the classical computing part, and then kind of try to put a spotlight on the differences and the similarities between quantum and classical.
Brilliant.
So in classical computing, in the very end, in the very bottom layer of what's happening, you have transistors, which are basically like a switch, and you can turn it off. It's either 1 or a 0, and as you said, it's very binary. It could be a 1 or a 0, and when you want to, for example, add two integers or multiply, then this is just mapped into a sequence of how these transistors are wired together. And then you just put as the input signal the binary coding of each of the integers. And then as an output, you will have ones and zeros that encode the answer to this question. And of course, this can be done much more complicated. So not only adding binary integers, but everything we see around us in the digital world, from internet to Zoom video conferences, all are in essence mapped to these binary signals and then performed on the binary transistors. And what happens in the quantum computing is that the fundamental processing unit is called a qubit. And similar to a bit, it also has a 1 and a 0, but the qubit is exactly this physical entity that is working by the laws of quantum mechanics. So instead of a transistor, you'd have, there are quite a lot of various technologies that incorporate a qubit. So it could be an atom, it can be several atoms that are charged or neutral, or you can have superconductors, or you can have sometimes even more exotic stuff. Sometimes it's even on photons, on particles of light. But what all of these have in common is that they have this possibilities of being both at 1 and 0 in the same time, and you can entangle them together, and they work according to the laws of quantum mechanics, which again are governed by the Schrödinger equation. And then when you want to do something, then you have a set of these qubits, and you generally what you do is evolve them in time. So just as a very maybe an example that will maybe put things into place, say you have a molecule. So the molecule is we know it exists, and we can formulate exactly how it behaves, and then we can start with how the molecule is at a time 0, and then evolve the molecule just as nature evolves it. With this Schrödinger equation, we can map this into sort of a time evolution on the qubits. So we actually have, in some sense, we encapsulated nature into these qubits. And this can be done in also many other problems that are not only in how nature behaves. So many of the optimization problems we're handling today, or machine learning problems, can also be mapped into these states that are propagated in time and then giving us the results we want. So that's
Wow, crazy.
in a nutshell.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot there. So you talked about qubits and how you said something about you either use atoms or photons. So are you speaking about the hardware itself of the computer?
Yeah. So that's where the analogy between the quantum and classical is actually quite good. So in the very bottom, a classical computer is always based on these binary switches, usually implemented by transistors. And in the exact same sense, in the bottom of the quantum computer lie these physical entities called qubits, and they're made instead of by transistors, by superconductors or by atoms. So you can have this one individual atom, and it has two energy states. And for example, the lower energy would be a 0, and the higher energy would be a 1. And if you'd, for example, shine a laser on it, right, pulse a laser on it, you can move the energy from 0 to 1. And if you gave half the pulse, so you'd be in a superposition. You won't be at half. You will be at a probability of 0 and a probability of 1, a superposition of both. So
Wow.
This is really crazy, but as Nir explained, that's the fun part.
It's amazing. It sounds basically that the hardware of the quantum computer it seems like it belongs in a lab. You know what I mean? It sounds like a physics experiment. Amazing. So your company, Classiq, what problem in this field are you guys trying to solve?
Right. So I'll start, and then I think we can talk about this for a couple hours only on this question. So just very generally, just as in the classical world, when you'd want to write an application, or even say you have a couple of numbers of integers and you want to sort them. And you know how to sort them, right? You'd take the first number and if the number to its right is larger, then you'd move it to the right or to the left, and right, you can sort all the integers like that. You have the algorithm in your head, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then making a computer do this involves taking these concepts you have in your head and actually translating them down into the bits that are implemented by the transistors.
Right.
So
These operators of the equations, you're translating it into the language of ones and zeros.
Exactly. And this involves many layers of what we call abstraction, right? The ability for you to express what you want, and then the technologies that take this mathematical expression now and translate it in the end into the transistors. So this is in the classical world, and in the quantum world, the challenge is actually quite similar. So you have all these problems, optimization problems, quantum chemistry problems, search problems. Actually, most of the hard problems in the world can be tackled in some way or another by a quantum computer. And you know what you want to do. You have this vision of the algorithm, but the distance from this algorithmic thought to the actual implementation on the qubits is very similar to what's happening in the classical world. Is a very complex translation. You need to build all these layers of abstraction. It's technologies built in the classical world over 70 years. So we're taking the most important of these technologies, the one that are the bottlenecks today for enterprise users and other people that are interested in solving these problems that have value and can benefit from their solving, and putting the technologies in place so that when the quantum computer is ready, then we won't be stuck on the software side, and we'll actually enable them to take these algorithms, from thought to actual implementation.
Amazing. So basically, classical computing, the software that we have there, in a sense, you guys are translating it into the language of quantum computing and figuring out already how to basically translate it into this language. Is that in a nutshell?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. It's quite exciting what's happening with quantum computing and quantum software, because, I'll make maybe a stupid analogy, but imagine, you have all the universe open, and you can plan the route for a specific star, right? How to navigate there. And you can do it. It's challenging, but you don't have the spaceship. But imagine that now you have a spaceship that can take you, all over the universe, but you don't really have the navigation to many stars. So that's kind of the story with quantum computing. For like 40 years, since the 80s, there was no hardware, right? No quantum computer at all. And all we could do was to design quantum algorithms. And it is very challenging, as Amir said. So far in 40 years, only a handful of useful quantum algorithms were developed. And some of the most famous were developed in the 90s. But in the 90s, you don't have this spaceship, right? You don't have a quantum computer. And all of a sudden, in the last 5 or 4 years, we're experiencing quantum computing revolution, because the computers themselves are transitioning from dream to reality. And in few years, we'll have useful quantum computers, which, figuratively could take us anywhere in the universe. And now we need to open this software bottleneck. We need to be able to design useful quantum algorithms. And that's a huge challenge we are trying to solve.
Amazing. So you guys are really planning ahead in that sense. So the field of quantum computing, what do you think are the real benefits of quantum computing over classical computing? Because we said that, like Richard Feynman said, that the world is quantum, so we need a quantum computer. But can you guys give us some examples of exactly is the difference in the ability of a quantum computer?
Yeah, sure. So I'll give two examples. Maybe one is more like what Feynman meant at the beginning, and one is in a very different space. So, okay, so as we said before, nature is quantum. And now let's take a look at ammonia. Ammonia this is a molecule, and that's probably the world's most important fertilizer, right? If we didn't know how to produce ammonia, we wouldn't have enough food in the world, so that would be a problem. And luckily we do know, because like 100 years ago, Fritz Haber invented the Haber-Bosch process, which allows us to produce ammonia. The problem is that this is a very energetic consuming process, and 2% of the world's energy consumption is dedicated for this process. And that's a lot of energy, a lot of money, a lot of pollution. And it's very frustrating because every plant in the universe, that's part of its nature. It's being done in room temperature without any energy consumption, almost any. So why can't we just, mimic this great natural process? And the answer is that we can't really simulate chemical processes, because classical computers, even the most powerful supercomputers in the world, just choke when they're trying to simulate molecule. Even if you take relatively simple molecules, it could take a billion years to simulate it. And that's one of the things that quantum computers are very good at, right? It can do it within a few seconds or minutes or hours, but it's possible. So that's one example. Another example, is solving all sorts of optimization problems, like traffic optimization or portfolio optimization in financial institutions, or options pricing, for example. Probably the most different example than mimic nature, right? But it helps, because classical computers are very limited, because if you want to solve some optimization problem which has many different possibilities, so classical computer is bounded to check one option at a time, right?
Right.
And if you have like 2 to the power of 300 options, which is larger than the number of atoms in the universe, you can't do it in a reasonable time. And this parallelism of quantum computers allows you to solve very, very crucial optimization problems in a very short time. So that's another use case. But basically, in every industry, there are revolutionary use cases. Only like a handful of useful quantum algorithms are known, but luckily, each of them is a revolution. So there is a good reason to wait for the next few years.
No, of course. When you think of solving any problem, there's so many different variables and there's so many possibilities. And, the human brain or consciousness, we can only think through so many options. And, we have a problem, we find a solution, and we don't realize there are second order and third order effects that we didn't account for. So it sounds like this quantum computing revolution basically is able to simulate through all of those possibilities and take into account all of these variables that we can't really fathom. We kind of know what's going on in there, but not quite.
Yes, first, you're totally right, but what should be avoided is falling into the hype, because it's very easy for me to say that.
Yeah.
On a quantum computer, on a 300 qubits quantum computer, the number of parallel computations is larger than the number of atoms in the universe. It's correct, it is correct, but the challenge is to know what to do with this parallelism, right? If you don't know how to manipulate the quantum state on the quantum computer to perform some useful tasks. And currently, we can barely do that. It would be nice to say that we have a great parallelism, but it won't give us a lot. But as you said, the potential is huge, and according to my opinion, we can barely imagine how will it look like in a decade.
Amazing. Yeah, no, because it's the potential is so great, and I think our imaginations are the limit here, and also the translational work that you guys are doing. It's almost like mapping out a new continent in a way. It's trying to understand how to speak in this language and how to solve these problems using this, like, it's almost like the superpower that we still don't know quite how to use and how to harness.
I want to add on that, not exactly on quantum computing, but in general on like emerging or new technologies. So sometimes there's just hype with not much essence underneath, but sometimes it's the other way around, right? If you have some incredible citations from the head of president of IBM and CEO of Intel on what they think are the markets and the propositions of classical computers back in the 50s and 60s. And you hear what these guys are saying, and it's like, there will be a market for maybe 5 computers. Someday we will make a computer weigh a ton and a half, like reduce the weight to only one, 1,500 kilograms. And then we see what's happening today with the classical computing, and also in the space industry, where where my background lies. So we had the first satellite back in the 50s, and it went beep beep, and no one really thought this had any real applications. But now none of us can move without a GPS that is generally just satellite constellations above us. And in a few years, we'll have fully connected worldwide internet anywhere in the world, no matter how remote, because we have like these constellation of satellites above us. So so that's like, no one can really fully grasp the potential of these incredible technologies in the first few years. And then I think when we'll be looking back to this decade or two, 30 years from now, 40 years from now, then I think we'll really grasp what this fundamental change was, or maybe see that we're mistaken the other way, and that for some reason physics that right now we don't understand really inhibits some of the amazing things that we think can be done.
Maybe, but from what you just said, it's almost like there isn't enough hype. If you look at all of these technologies that have been developed 100 years ago, like on the course of the past 100 years, as you said, people didn't understand how revolutionary each of these things was going to be, and they underestimated it. And if you take that pattern into account, then most likely quantum computing is going to have that same effect, because it's really like I said, the imagination is the limit, and it's hard to fathom a new world where things are so different. If you take into take for example, like you said, the satellite, right, and the GPS, and we all have a computer in our pocket, we all have a smartphone, and that was just 2008,
right,
something like
exactly,
that.
Exactly,
insane.
So yeah, it's really exciting to see what lies ahead. Yeah,
absolutely.
We're looking forward.
Absolutely. So I wanted to kind of shift gears here and talk a bit about your whole process and your whole journey in founding Classiq, because being an entrepreneur and founding a company, founding a startup is, it's always requires, I think, a leap of faith, right? Really believing in your vision and believing in yourself that you're able to implement it, and, going forth into the world. And you guys are doing that in a field that is still hasn't fully developed, right? It's going to take a few years until the hardware catches up. So I want to kind of hear about, first of all, the initial inspiration that you guys had for quantum computing and for Classiq in particular. And how do you guys stay motivated in this field where the the ROI on this might take a few years, right? For the field to catch up with what you're doing.
Yeah, maybe I'll start. So for me, I mean, this is an incredible journey, right? And of course we're putting a lot on the line here. So we're any startup or company you're going to found is fundamentally with a lot of risk, and then when you're into this field with so many uncertainties and things that are not fully mature yet, so it's even an extra risk, right? But I think the main motivation would be, what is the impact, right? How I mean, you have a limited time to spend, and you want your time to be devoted to something that actually makes a change and actually makes an impact. And for that, risk taking is something that for me, I'm willing to tolerate. I'm willing to take the long run and willing to, invest my time and efforts for something that I know won't succeed in 100%, or I have a lot of uncertainties, but the upside is incredible, right? The upside is really building something from 0 to 1, both in the regular sense of building a company, but also in the sense of this technology and being in the front wave and actually creating something new, moving into uncharted territory. So this is something that's exciting enough for me to outweigh the risks and the downsides.
Absolutely. It's such an adventure.
Yeah, well, I nodded a lot when Amir talked. So maybe I'll just say, establishing a startup in a blue ocean, it's risky, right? Because you can turn up to be a very large shark in an empty ocean and, to starve. On the other hand, establishing a startup in a red ocean, well, it's dangerous as well. And I think with quantum computing it's kind of exciting timing, because obviously it's not too late, right? We are, we feel it, whether it's even with patents, we are filing some patents which it's unbelievable we can file right now, because it is a blue ocean and we can really establish our presence as market leaders. On the other hand, it's risky, and maybe like cold fusion, right? Cold fusion, this technology, it's always constantly 5 years ahead, right? And it never happens. So maybe quantum computing is like that. I don't think so. Nor Google and Amazon and IBM, Intel, Microsoft and governments. It doesn't look like that. But if we took the wrong bet, it's great. Because if quantum computers aren't possible, to scale up, it means we discovered some new physics. We understood that the world doesn't work how we thought. And that's, as exciting as building a $1 billion company. And,
Amazing.
Yeah.
No, I mean, from what you just said, it's kind of like, you're entrepreneurs and scientists at the same time. You're willing to have the hypothesis be disproven. In the worst case, there's information in that and there's a discovery in that. But I think what you guys are doing is amazing and has so much potential.
I mean, also, just maybe one more thing that you reminded me in your last sentence like, it's not only on whether quantum happens, whether the business succeeds. We're also, I mean, for me personally, it's an incredible personal growth journey, right? So, I mean, even if everything fails, it would be really sad on the one hand, but I mean, the tools and the things I've learned from this past year and a half. So it's something I don't think that any formal education or any book you read can really give you that sense of what it's like and how, I mean, this wider perspective on things.
No, absolutely. It's said a lot that the entrepreneurial spirit, really what it requires is the ability to absorb failures. And there's something in that of realizing that even if, and we're talking about this as if it's like, as if it's already failed, and that's not the case. When there's something risky involved, then you kind of always have to have in the back of your mind, what am I going to do in the worst case? And I think treasuring the journey and everything that you're learning from this and everything that you're gaining, and also I think just the self-respect of being able to venture out and start something new and build something from scratch, right? And if this doesn't work, then the next thing will work. So I think that's just having that spirit of being able to trust the process and just do the best you can and trust that it'll work out. And yes, it is also a very personal journey that you guys are going through right now. So I'd love to hear how, when you guys thought about this together, was the idea kind of both had the idea together? Was it over conversation? Did one of you did it pop in your head and you call it the other one? And
so
yeah,
actually, when I was 7 years old, I dreamed that I'm going to initiate a startup in the field of physics. No, I'm just kidding.
I was like, wow, what a story. 7 years old, I can imagine you.
No, I was dreaming about football and stuff like that. But no, so actually we were both in the army, right? In a technical world, but we knew what we wanted to do, right? And since 2015 or 16, we had a joint WhatsApp group which was called Startup 2019 because we knew that that's exactly what we want to do after we finish our service. And then 2019 arrived, and so we needed to initiate a startup, right? But so actually, we didn't start from quantum computing. We started with several different ideas in neuroscience and in computer vision, and we, I think that what was more important for us is entrepreneur. Wow, that's
entrepreneurship. I know. I always mess it up.
Yeah, I should have practiced. Yeah, so that's one, and not specifically the topic, right? We wanted to do something good, but the main metric, to be honest, at that stage was finding the right field which will enable us to, to leverage our experience and to initiate some good company in a good field that could bring good, but could also do a good business. It's not academy; it's the real life. So and then after a few months, and after killing some nice ideas which weren't good enough for many reasons, we started talking about quantum computing. It was a bit after Google has published their quantum supremacy. And the other thing that was very important is Amir's father, Dr. Naveh, which we usually call just Yuda. So he is a world-leading expert in this field, and he worked at IBM for 20 years, and specifically in the last 5 or 6 years, he established and was leading the IBM quantum activity in Israel, which is very important in the entire IBM quantum activity. And we started talking with him about initiate a startup in this field, and we made a lot of progress, Amir and myself, and we learned a lot of quantum computing. We had the relevant background, but deep diving into this field was very challenging. And we did a lot of research on various ideas. Some were definitely too early, like management of quantum in the cloud or things like that. Some were already maybe too late because some of the tech giants are doing them, and we wanted to find the idea that scale up with the market, right? Because otherwise we wouldn't fulfill the entire potential of this revolution. And I think this idea, which provides enterprises with the ability to design their own quantum algorithms, that's the one. And the rest is after that we just we initiated this company Yuda, of course, took a huge leap of faith, and we resigned from IBM in a very, very good terms. He built there an incredible team, which is flourishing these days. And it's exciting.
Amazing. Amazing. So, you guys mentioned the WhatsApp group. I wanted to ask on that, how I think one of the really important things when you're founding a startup is the team that you're working with, right? And your partner. And what would you say, how did you guys know that you guys would make good partners for each other?
Right. So we're both eager to answer that one. I think. So for me and Nir, it goes a really long way back. So we've known each other since we were 14, and really took all the major steps in life together. Right, same middle school, same high school, same army service in the same place with the same people. Also. Rented rooms in the same apartment, and
Wow.
really like both originally from Haifa and big football fans. So it's really like goes a long way back. And I think if there are any entrepreneurs listening to this podcast, so I think my one bit of advice on how to really found something is first to find the right partners. And when you have the right partner with also the same mindset of what your goals are, and I mean, there are a lot of questions on this. How far are you looking ahead? Are you building something for 20 years ahead, for 10 years ahead? Are you looking only short term for a half year, a year? And then once you figure out the big things, what your personal goals are, how you're going to work together and divide responsibilities, then I mean, there are many ideas in the world, and what is really there is a lack of is people that are willing to take risks and build these ideas, take them from something that is conceptual and thoughts into practice and actually building something. So I'd say first step is definitely the people, and then. I mean, for us both, I mean, Nir mentioned earlier that we're working with a third partner, which is my father, and he's one of the few people I've known longer than Nir. So, and I mean, so that's also a huge privilege. I mean, both for me personally, and of course, he's really one of the brightest and sharpest people that I got to work with and know for most of my passion for physics and for mathematics came from him and from a very young age. So I'm really happy that our paths converged at some point. But for sure, this is the one thing that actually I think makes the difference, makes things work or not work, and builds great companies, or like it takes you into a path of suffering. It depends on which if you make the decision right or not.
No, of course. I think the people that are around you it's the most important thing. Whether you're, founding a company or you're working in any job, right? It's the people around you. But really in such an enterprise, when you're taking on this huge risk and there's so much work that needs to go into it, having someone there to experience it with you, and someone who's aligned with your values and your goals. And I think there's only so much we can do by ourselves, and even not only do, but think, right? There's only so much that only so many problems that we can think through and solve by ourselves. There's something in having another brain in the room, right? Another perspective that's so helpful to see another side of something, to, where you might be a little bit more worried about one thing, your partner can balance you out, and vice versa. I think it's so important.
Maybe I'll just also add on, I mean, so obviously this is the most important part, finding the right partners to work this journey on. And then I think for us, we see the whole team as part of like an extended family, right?
Mm-hmm.
So everyone that is working with us is I mean, we're both co-workers, friends, someone to share this journey with, and it's really important. So happily, not only in this case, not only the founders, but also the team. I mean, it's a fundamental part of the journey, and also will make, in my view, the things really succeed or fail. That's what it number one depends on.
Yeah, I think, if you're creating a company with a culture of family where everyone feels like they're, working towards the same goal and everyone's connected, I think there's no better motivation than that, right? That's a company where people are happy to come into work every day. They're excited. They feel valued themselves. They feel seen, and I think that can be lacking in a lot of office environments, maybe more corporate environments. But really fostering that sense of family and sense of we're all in this together and everyone has something to contribute. I think that's so powerful. Would you say that is your main company culture? Is there anything else that's values that are important for you guys to have in your company?
I'd say, I mean, there are a lot, but I'd say excellence is for sure. I mean, something that, I mean, it's something everyone strives for, but I think individually and collectively, it's something that we really, I mean, people have a hard time when things are mediocre. It's like from the individual person writing their bit of code to what the product really enables, and if the customer is satisfied or not. I mean, people will take not only the extra mile, but the extra 10 miles if needed to make things happen, not because I would be upset or angry or anyone else would be dissatisfied, but because it comes from an individual sense of just when we have a task, whether it's individual or collective, then this task is done, in an excellent way. I think that would be my number one out of many.
I love that. Like first of all, striving for excellence, but in general, doing the best you can, in every situation. Might not be perfect, but having that attitude of I'm going to do this in the best way I can and not to half-ass things, right? Because I think when you start half-assing things in general, it's you lose a little respect for yourself in the process. You're not happy with the product. And even if what you do isn't perfect, when you did your best, there's such satisfaction in that, right? There's a feeling of growth in that. So having that, as a company culture, I think that's so important and really help recruit everyone towards the same goal. Amazing, amazing. So, starting to wrap up, I have a few questions. So, if you were to give advice to young entrepreneurs today, what would you want? Let's do it this way. What would you want your younger selves to know, like 5 years ago, about founding a company and embarking on this journey?
Wow, that's a tough one. Um, my piece of advice would be to think not so much of, what is the best idea, or maybe what do you like to do? How do you like your everyday life look like? I was I was very technical in the army, right? I was a researcher and I led teams. Okay, but I, uh, you know, my happiest moments were talking to people and pushing things to happen, and to making things happen. And other people just like to code or to do the research, and everyone needs to know what is most attractive for them. So when we discussed who should be a head of engineering or VP R&D or CTO or CEO, it was very easy because both of us knew perfectly well why we are here. So it's hard, but try not to think about how shiny will it be to establish a startup. It's not. It is, but most of the time you are you're too busy to be satisfied with yourself. I'm never satisfied with myself because my job is not to be satisfied. And you can have a look at the hairline of both of us, and you can understand which is the most stressed one. And that's my nature, and that's okay. But that's what I like to do, and I think that would be my piece of advice.
Amazing. I think, first of all, you kind of touched on this anxiety, that keeps you unsatisfied. And I think, it might not be fun, but it's one of the most important things to actually do big things, right? Because you're never quite at peace with not doing anything,
Yes.
right? You're constantly wanting to do better and to create, and it might be stressful, but I relate to that kind of feeling of something that's constantly pushing you to move, and to do more.
It's okay to be satisfied for 5 seconds, but
No, of course, that's why we have mindfulness, and we need to remember to enjoy ourselves as well, and celebrate the accomplishments. But I think a little bit of that fire is it's a good thing. It's a good thing as well. And the other thing that you mentioned about knowing what you like to do, I think that's so important. And we don't really talk about it that much. I think this idea of not looking right and left at what everyone else is doing and trying to understand, what are my unique qualities? What are my skills? What do I bring to the table on the one hand? And then what do I enjoy doing, right? And sometimes just in like the logistics of your day, right? Do you like being with people, or are you so introverted and it exhausts you and you want to be, in front of a computer all day? Do you like a job that's very dynamic, or do you like something that's a little bit more repetitive where you can, feel like you're doing better and better each day on the same task? So there's all of these different dimensions, and I think really, really going through that with yourself and understanding what's important to you and what kind of impact you want to have in the world. I think that's also right. How your unique set of traits, how you can make the most of it.
And maybe one more advice. Keep healthy. Don't be an idiot. If you don't sleep and don't eat and don't talk to your parents or meeting friends, it's okay. You will be busy. You have to be, and that's like all I'm doing. Okay, constantly. That's what I'm doing, and yet it's important. Whether it's jogging or meditation or sleeping enough, it's so important. Not doing it doesn't makes you a better CEO or CTO. It makes you not scalable. So
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I think there's this whole idea of work-life balance, and it became kind of like this catchphrase. But I think that this idea of when I look at my day-to-day and everything that I'm trying to do in my life, I feel like half of my life goes to maintenance. It's the sleep, it's the eating right, it's the exercising, it's talking to friends, it's seeing family, it's all of these different things that makes the work worthwhile as well, right? Because if you're just exhausting yourself, where there is this kind of, I think, kind of this archetype of like the exhausted CEO, and just, I'm not even sleeping and I don't even have time to eat, and I'm just like working myself to the bone, and the harder I work and the less I take care of myself, like the more virtuous I am.
Yeah, good for you.
Exactly. And like you said, it's not scalable, it's not sustainable. And, what kind of relationships are you going to have in your life? Like, what is all of this hard work going into, right? You want to have that balance of first taking care of yourself, taking care of your relationships, and not having everything be about work, because I think then kind of lose sight of, why are you doing what you're doing, right? Amazing. So, okay, Amir, same question. Going to you now.
Wow. Okay. So, the first advice I'd give, I already said. I think the people you're going to walk this journey with is the number one parameter, right? Just as probably the decision of who you're going to marry is probably
Yeah.
number one in the happiness indicator afterwards. So, I mean, you can make a really crappy choice or you can make a really good one. So, I think that's number one in what I would tell people, and really sort of forget about the rest. Once you have assembled a good team, then together you'll find the idea and you'll find the path forward and you'll find what your exact business model will be and what your product, what you're going to build, and you won't be afraid to succeed and fail together. So that's really important. And I think, I mean, this really is a marathon, right? So it connects to what Nir said about keeping balanced and not stressing yourself to the bone. But also, I mean, you need to be able to look at what's happening today and what's happening this week on all scales, on what's happening with the product today and what's happening with the business and what happens to all the stakeholders. That's happening. I mean, you're always late for some deadline. So that's on the one hand, but you need to remember that great companies are not built in a day or a week or a year, right? It's a journey, and if you spare the time to work on the culture and you work on building your team and you work on putting the big blocks in first, right? And you actually focus on these things as well. So that's the way you're going to succeed, because there is always going to be something urgent, but sometimes the important things are not stressing you this minute, but they will find you in the end, right? For better or for worse.
Yeah. I love that, idea of making sure the foundations are strong, right? And that's, like you said, the people that you're working with, the company culture that you're cultivating. Those are the foundations that at the end of the day, if there's a storm, you guys are going to be able to weather it. And yes, this distinction between the urgent and the important, right? Because there's, like you said, there's always something that you're late for, some deadline that's looming overhead, but really taking the time of building these.
It's misleading because there's always things that are both urgent and important.
Yeah.
You're never going to say this is urgent, but it's not important, so I'm going to do it just because it's deadline for tomorrow. No, you're always working on urgent and important things, but you also have to leave place for the important, non-urgent things. Sometimes those are the really big blocks that need to be taken care of.
Right. Those are really the things that, sustain at the end of the day. Wonderful. Okay. So the podcast is called The Bigger Picture, right? And there's this idea of the bigger picture being kind of a way of looking at the world, right? It's looking at a situation and saying, what is the big idea here, right? Zooming out and seeing the hidden meaning behind things. So I think take that and you look at the bigger picture, first of all, in your personal life, what your personal bigger picture is, and also what is the bigger picture of your company, Classiq, and what you hope to accomplish with it. So who wants to start?
I'll start. Yeah,
Okay.
I'll start. So I'll go in the order you described. So I'll take it first on the personal level. So this really is an incredible growth journey. So for me, I'm an optimistic guy by nature. So I'm actually I'm optimistic. I think this company will succeed, and that will be, will open for me whole new frontiers of possibilities, right? From senior management in a huge company to having all this experience on how to build things from scratch. That's huge. But even in the pessimistic case where all I had was the experience and in the end something went the wrong way. So for me, number one priority is always to learn and to challenge myself and to learn new things. And this fundamentally comes with doing things that are outside of the comfort zone, right? That are really hard. And that's that's number one for me. I mean, I hope until the day that my power leaves my body, then I will continue doing these things that are challenging and teach me new skills and put me in different situations. That's what really gives me a kick, right? So that's on a personal level. And I'm also having like a blast, right? It's the time of my life. So in that sense, it's time well spent. And from the company's point of view, I mean, you can't really be better positioned to be a market leader than where we're at. We're at the right timing. Of course, it could move a year or two in either direction, and there can be unknowns. But as far as we can see, this is, I mean, the wave is coming, and we're on it, and the domain is right, and the team is excellent, and the challenges are real. So you can't solve these things with like nice user interface or graphical design, right? You need to really put in the technology to make it work. So again, I mean, best case scenario, 5 years from now, Google or Microsoft of quantum computing is Classiq, and we're really leading the software space. And I mean, it can go many different other ways, but I mean, that's the dream, and I hope that's where we're aiming. That's the big picture for Classiq.
Amazing.
Wow, it will be hard to compete. Luckily, I don't need to.
No competition here.
Yeah. So for me, I'm not very good at being happy from the process and from trying. If the result is not good, I'm not very satisfied of the way, and that's not good. It's much better to be satisfied. But, if I just finish, half a marathon and I didn't break my record, it wasn't good, right? So I'm very success oriented, and that's my motivation. But my real bigger picture is, don't be snob, don't be an asshole, That's fine. You are a CEO in a funded startup. Stay nice, help people, feed 100 cats in the street. Don't be a dick. It's so easy to become one. And, try to do good and not, thinking, only of yourself. And for Classiq, quantum computers are going to change the world. Today, using it, writing software for that is impossible. We make it possible. That's the bigger picture for me.
Amazing. What you guys are doing is absolutely incredible. And you guys are so amazing. And I mean, just, everything that you guys have said and shared, and, the optimism, the being down to earth, and, how important it is for you guys to foster this, family culture in your company. And I can tell that you guys are, still have your values in check, right? And you still, have your eyes on what's important. And I love that. And I think Classiq is going to be amazing. And I can't wait to see you guys just soar and quantum computing, take off. And it's been such a pleasure talking with you guys. Thank you for coming.
Thank
you so much, Oni. It was a great pleasure.
Happy to continue and see what other episodes and other people are coming. This is really interesting. I mean, it really does give the bigger picture. So yeah, we're looking forward to hearing the other interviewees as well.
Oh, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. I'll definitely send you once everything is up as well. Wonderful. All right, and we're out. For everyone out there listening, thank you for tuning in to The Bigger Picture. I hope you found this conversation interesting. You can find us on all podcasting platforms, wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to hit subscribe to stay up to date with the latest episodes. My name is Roni Figron. This is The Bigger Picture, and thank you for listening. Until next time.